Good evening. Welcome. Welcome to the After Hours show with the Autonomous Collective. My name is Joe, and no longer in Norway, Joe Umami in southern Turkey. I'm joined by Anne Lee, a retired college professor and community member at the Daily Kos. She is a member of the National Council of Independent Scholars and is a contributor to the book, The Political Economy of Art, Making the Nation of Culture. Evening, Anne.
Hey there, Joe. What's for supper?
Oh boy, we've got a dish that is an Anatolian favorite, one that is probably the most popular street food, one that will be 100% vegetarian as mandated by the state of Turkey. They are, just let me get my share up here. What was that? Fine. I will be making mercimek köftesi. See that? And I think, John, you'll appreciate this. We are not making çiğ köfte. This was the one that I was confused by on the street. This is raw meat with parsley, cumin, onion that is typically served as an appetizer. It's a mez appetizer, traditional Turkish dish that's super popular. But we're going to be making the vegetarian version, which is popular with the Armenians, or I'm not sure if the origin was from Armenia, in these provinces down in southern Turkey, basically. But this is a lentil bulghur version of it, which is 100% vegetarian. So what I had thought in the shops was the essentially beef tartare kofta. They're no longer that, because in 2008, public sales of çiğ köfte with raw meat were banned by the health ministry of Turkey due to health hazards, especially teniasis, and thus leaving only plant-based versions in shops and restaurants. So you can, whenever you get a meal at a restaurant, you'll get the number of side dishes, and it'll often come with these kofta that are on top of lettuce leaves, and you can use the lettuce leaf like a tortilla, wrap the kofta in that with a squeeze of lemon. Very tasty. So this would be a picture of the lentil-based version.
Yum.
Whereas that would be more the papar. So essentially, it's either meat with bulgur or red lentils with bulgur.
Okay.
Which we've got here. So I've got some red lentil. I should have had split. So this dish could take some time. It's supposed to take some time. You have to cook it. You have to cool it. I'm not going to have the opportunity to cool it, but I do have my fan, so I'll try to cool it down a little bit to be able to work with the dough. So since these are whole, I'm going to be pressure cooking them, but I'm going to toast them, heat them up in the pan so that they have some, they generate the lentils generate enough heat to absorb water faster, plus the pressure will then make it cook quicker. Typically, if you have split lentils, they take less than 6 minutes in the pressure cooker to turn to mush. So I think we'll do good on the time with the pressure cooker. We've got fine bulgur wheat, which is, if you look on the labels, they'll say something along the lines of for preparation of, this is all in Turkish, but cheap cooked bulgur. So basically, it's like it'll tell you whether it's the one you want to use for this dish. The main ingredients besides the lentils. So the process here is we're gonna cook the lentils and dump after we're gonna cool down do a quick release on the pressure cooker. So pour cold water over the pressure cooker until so that it comes down, pressure goes down, open it up, stir in the bulgur. So the residual water and heat from the lentils will then be absorbed by the bulgur. Let that sit while I prepare the other things. We're going to saute some onion and garlic. And the main flavorings are tomato paste, cumin, and this I used last week. Oh no, week before. This is the similar to tomato paste. This is a chili version. So it's dried chilies that have been like sun-dried peppers, basically. It's been dried into a paste, and they're quite flavorful. So, and then we chop up some parsley, chop up some fresh scallion, mix those together, and then we make these little patties. And the traditional method is to roll them into an elongated ball and then squeeze them with your fingers so that it gets the handprint kind of signature shape of these. And then you lay them on lettuce leaves and some slices of lemon as garnish. So that's the plan tonight. So it should take me about an hour. We'll work fast.
All right. So we'll occasionally check in on where
Yes.
you're going to be pressure cooking at the front end anyway, right?
Yeah. So we're gonna we got the pressure cooker here.
Nice.
Yeah. And sauteing onions.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, shall I begin, I guess?
Have at it. Hammer away.
Yeah, it's yammer time. Busy week. Variety of strange things have happened, and so let's start with the American stuff, namely because it's pretty chaotic. Forbes magazine just reported that the British bookmakers have now moved Trump ahead of Harris in terms of who's going to win the election, which is not necessarily a bad sign, just simply that more people are putting in bets, that's all. And since pretty much anybody can bet, I'm going to assume that Russian money is entering the fray there. So that's there's lots of manipulation of these matters. So you don't tend to rely on those things, particularly betting pools. Although, it's certainly an interesting idea. Even Daily Kos has a betting pool. Not that you win anything, you win babka bread. That's that's a hell of a prize, but that's what you win. Anyway, the week was difficult. Tomorrow, El Trumpo is going to be in California at Coachella, not the exact spot of Coachella. The
music festival,
concert venue, but the same people who actually put on the festival are actually Republicans and big donors, and they have another property or bunches of property, I assume, out in the Valley and Coachella Valley. And aside from their polo ponies and the usual kinds of paraphernalia, that's what's happening. Another of their properties, they're going to do a rally for Trump, and so you'll the odds. It's odd because apparently there is one guy who's sort of in the district and is, I think, the incumbent Republican, and they're doing it essentially to promote California people in the House. But many people are asking, well, why bother? And similarly, that was what Trump was doing a couple of weeks
Sorry,
ago.
Ann, hold on, let me put my mic off here.
Hit it. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Your mic's
Apologies
off.
for the interruption.
No, no. No, no. Good to see. Good to see stuff happening. Similarly, things are boiling in, it's supposed to be over 100 degrees out there in the Coachella Valley, so there will be people passing out, as did some people at a Harris rally in Arizona. So that's going to be a sort of a par for the course as we watch more stuff being produced, sauteed et al. Anyway, a hot weekend. Today, there is supposed to be a Trump appearance in Aurora, Colorado, where Trump has claimed that buildings have been taken over by Venezuelan street gangs, which is, as the police in Aurora have said, and the city officials have said, is no such thing. But the stories continue, and of course, there have been threats of violence and all the usual matters. So that's happening right now.
Aurora, that was the scene of some mass shooting, wasn't it? Was that the gay bar that
Uh,
was attacked?
no, that's Colorado Springs. Aurora was
Ah,
where the medical student went nuts and shot up a theater. And
ah.
I think 6 or 7 people died. I can't recall. Raising a variety of questions about the question of concealed carry, et cetera, because I think a couple of people in the audience actually had firearms, but they did not shoot back. And which is what you're supposed to do, actually. It is about self-defense. It's not about taking the law into your own hands. So there's a big difference between people who think they can become cops and those who are simply acting in self-defense. There's a big difference. Anyway, but that's probably what Aurora has been famous for relative to this kind of violence. So that's what Trump has been counting on, but apparently all attempts are pretty futile. So this week has had a variety of things. Usual Trump kind of out there. He has kind of gotten unhinged in various speeches, and unfortunately, mainstream media is not pointing out that he has been completely unhinged. I mean, he just says things that it requires you to sort of do sort of a deep interpretive dive, where he combines the circles in which Biden supporters had from a COVID distancing from 2020. So, but Trump will never mention that. He just talks about circles, and nobody knows what he's talking about. And so it takes a little bit of work to sort of get there. And that's not really in the purview of Trump fans. So that's kind of going on. He was asked a question last week in Warren, Michigan. What actions will you take to ensure that our jobs stay in America? Trump's answer is, I was honored as the Man of the Year. Maybe 20 years ago, you see, the fake news heard about it and said it never happened. So, um, like JD Vance, there are no answers coming for questions. It's simply another opportunity to yammer. And not unlike me, but this past week, essentially there was retconning going on. That is a kind of revisionist history. That is, Trump has for decades now claimed that he was uh, awarded or honored as Man of the Year in Michigan. Well, technically, it was some kind of minor ceremony for a little group in a specific town or county that made him Man of the Year, and he always blows it up as saying Michigan itself, as a state, uh, awarded him Man of the Year. And that the fact is, it's been fact checked now multiple times. And Daniel Dale's opinion on this is Trump claimed, as he still does, that he was Man of the Year in Michigan long before entering politics. Daniel Dale and others, Daniel Dale is the fact checker for CNN, pointed out for 7 years that he was making this up, and he was. Number three, after 7 years of these fact checks, a GOP group decided to name him Man of the Decade. So it didn't quite address the Man of the Year question, but since they've now proclaimed him in retrospect Man of the Decade in 2023, which goes back to 2013, even though he was claiming Man of the Year before that, it's just bizarre. But it's a continuing lie. There's several other lies that he continues to repeat. Certain things about veterans benefits that was put in by Obama. He says that in every speech, and he gets fact checked every time, and he never corrects himself. So the fact is, he thinks that if you keep repeating it, people will believe it, and that's certainly possible. But the fact is, he keeps repeating these lies that are constantly being debunked. So anyway, I wrote something on that, and I used Snopes and all the usual sources. But he continues to say it, and it'll be interesting to see him say it at least once or twice more when he's in Michigan, and people will challenge it. So essentially, it goes back to a 2013 Lincoln Day dinner in the Oakland County Republican Party. So that's in retrospect, he's a Man of the Decade back to 2013. So that's really what it means. So he's never truly been Man of the Year. He claims he has evidence to that effect, but it doesn't exist. And so, needless to say, at the same time, he insulted Detroit while campaigning in the city. So he said stupid things about Detroit while being in Detroit. And he was speaking at the Detroit Economic Club, which actually has a fair amount of reputable people in it. And he just made up all kinds of crap about we're not going to let them come into our country and destroy what's left over auto industry because it's a failing industry, just like we're a failing country. It's just like, you're in Detroit and you say not nice things about the primary industry of the state. We're a failing country. We're a nation in decline. I hope you know that, blah, blah, blah. So it's sort of interesting. But then he gets off into this thing. He says, well, that was the first I said, who the hell did that? I saw engines about 3-4 years ago. These things were coming, cylinders, no wings, no nothing. And they're coming down very slowly, landing on a raft in the middle of the ocean, someplace with a circle. Boom. Now, if you sort of parse through that, he doesn't precede this by saying, well, this is how SpaceX gets their missiles back down to the ground. It just, he just verges off into these references and pretty weird. So that's been happening. He just forgets, what he's saying. And that's been the week of falsehoods, and they're getting worse. Daniel Dale did do a double check. There were 40 mistruths in 2 days, over 2 days of speeches. He said even stranger things, I think 2 days ago. That is, over the seas, and it comes right over our land. And then they want us to have clean. I said, wait a minute, we're going to have clean, but it's all flying. Just remember that. Does that make sense? In other words, it's all coming through the currents through the air. It all comes. They can name it. They can say exactly where it's going to be and when. So I think it refers to SpaceX, but he doesn't say it in the front end. And so it's like this random blurting out. And
Maybe he was channeling Bill O'Reilly, discussing the
yes,
tides going in.
we'll do it live. Let's see, this past week, he was in Scranton. He had a bunch of people holding up signs saying Scranton firefighters for Trump. There were no firefighters there at all, just random people holding signs. The press went out and asked people holding Scranton firefighters for Trump if they were in fact firefighters, and they weren't. So Adam Schiff put up a little tweet that asked, "Are the circles in the room with us now?" So this is it's a pre-election lying spree. 40 separate false claims in the two Pennsylvania speeches this week. Let's see, what else did he say? In Reading, Pennsylvania, where he claimed there were, I don't know, 50,000 people. The venue itself only held 7,500, but the usual Trump. He claimed of his election opponents, they are cheating dogs. I don't know what a cheating dog is, but they are cheating dogs, I will tell you that. And in Scranton, he falsely claimed their first meeting is, how do we cheat? Well, it's just his continuing claim is, of course, to discredit the 2020 election, or to ask the more specific question that was asked by Tim Walz of J.D. Vance, who won the 2020 election. And of course, J.D. Vance could not admit that Trump was a loser, and or that Biden won. And that, it's quite fascinating to see this homina. And in several interviews since then, J.D. Vance has been asked the question, and he refused. It's not so much that he refuses to answer, but that he answers a question with a question and tries to, move the subject somewhere else, not answering the question. Fortunately, some people in the media have now taken to just simply asking the same question again to try and get the it's a yes or no question. He just won't say yes or no. I mean, he just won't. And fascinating to see people try and do that several times. It's a yes or no question. And so anyway, it is. This all is in the context of the so-called cheating claim. And the most important thing that actually happened this week was that a filing by Trump lawyers, I think, that admit, on the basis of not of that Trump's speech at the Ellipse prior to the J6 riot, demonstration, attack on the Capitol, whatever, was private conduct, and therefore not subject to the official act's immunity. So, in effect, his counsel has decided to, at least in this particular context, in terms of proving causality for his responsibility for the January 6th attack, it's a private act, not an official act. And it's probably always been that way, but the fact that they had to sort of reassert it also sets down kind of, the marker of where there is or isn't official act immunity. And it's just rolling along. I think we're going to see at least a couple more sort of related bombshell things that are going to move forward, because it was vague whether his being at this little rally on the Ellipse, the same rally that earlier on he allowed people to skip using the magnetometers because they actually had firearms. And that's all in the J6 report, et cetera. So needless to say, he knew at that moment that people were heavily armed, and you know, I mean, he said, well, you know, they're not here for me. Whatever that meant. Um, so anyway, Trump argues in this sense that he has a First Amendment right to make his lip speech. But then, you know, Jack Smith, special counsel, reminded us in the immunity brief to SCOTUS last year that the First Amendment, because that's the claim in here that it's bedrock First Amendment principles, that the First Amendment protects private citizens, not the government. And so, you know, this is an interesting question that will help define the immunity question once it moves further and gets to trial. But needless to say, things that are being filed prior to that, and this is that whole, you know, request by the Supreme Court to get, you know, to flesh out some of these things. And that's all happening, and it's happening in October. Surprise. It may not be the surprise, but it's surprising. Let's just put it that way. And there will be more, I think, in an official way without even resorting to all this crazy crap that is being enunciated. So that's happening. Where are we now?
If I may interrupt,
Yeah.
the alarm went off, so the lentils should be finished cooking. I've got the tomato and chili paste sauteing with the onions. I don't know if you noticed, there's not much difference between the high and the lowest setting on this gas stove. You may encounter this. So what I do to avoid it, I haven't been able to find a flame deflector or a flame diffuser, which is basically a round metal plate, usually perforated with a bunch of holes. It's got several layers of metal, and it's alternating holes throughout. So it basically the flame goes in and then distributes the heat so that your pans don't burn. So I've basically got a saute pan for the pressure cooker to sit inside of so that doesn't burn. And now that that's done, I'll just do the same thing over here. So if you find that you're John, you got this brand new stove. You might not have the right controls on that. I don't know. You might want to check it out. But you need a flame diffuser with a gas stove, or worst case scenario, you do something like this. But now we've got the pressure cooker that is still under pressure. And the way that we get it down, again, cold release method. Cold water over the pan. Be careful not to burn yourself with the runoff. And you'll hear it eventually release.
Running water sound effects.
Back to the kitchen ASMR. Oh, and we have no residual liquid. That will be a problem. Did I say this was an experiment as well? Because I've never made this dish.
Well.
First time.
Are you gonna pressure cook it again or what?
No. They're finished. You can see now after 8 minutes under pressure, they're complete mush. So that's the right texture.
Okay.
But I believe I need a little bit more water because the bulghur that we're going to put in there is going to bulk it up.
Okay.
Now we'll just leave this to thicken. Come back later to mix. So
nice.
Back to you, eh?
Okie dokie. More recently, there have been a couple of Spanish language interviews that have come up. I think there are two Univision ones. Trump hasn't done his yet, but Kamala Harris did hers, and there was a lot of questions asked about whether Trump had any virtue at all. And then there's another question that was asked about, Donald Trump's parenting style. That was asked at the Detroit Economic Club. There's a lot of footage of this. Trump was asked about his parenting style, but instead he went on an 8-minute rant that essentially ended with calling for drug dealers to be put to death, which is kind of extreme in terms of a parenting style, but needless to say, that's kind of where his brain is at. Other claims are, of course, the question being asked of J.D. Vance was whether he agreed that Biden won the election or Trump lost, however you want to put it. And the counterexample that Vance used, and there's tape of this, video of this, in fact, was that Hunter Biden's nude photos. So that's the counterexample, which makes little or no sense relative to admitting that Trump lost the election. But, that's kind of where they are now. And unfortunately, it is a style that I realize that the Democrats occasionally do this in terms of deflecting a question. It is how you deflect certain types of questions. But in fact, I think Republicans resort to it more often, and usually with really more outrageous alternative versions. And so it is, in fact, a kind of, it is disinformational. That is, that it includes a certain measure of misinformation, but then it verges, as Trump and Vance do, particularly if it's in a public speech setting, it turns into malinformation, which verges into hate speech. Hate speech or appeals to violence are malinformation and not disinformation. So there is a kind of spectrum here. On the one hand, you have just simply a misstatement of fact. On the other, you have a kind of introduction of facts that are not necessarily relevant, that attempt to deflect message production. And then finally, there is something called, and you can see it as a kind of Venn diagram, a malinformation that is simply intentionally divisive, let's put it that way. And so the current kind of statement in a variety of writings that have come out towards the end of the week, Bulwark is talking about how Trump is not just simply leveling attacks, he's outlining a strikingly dark worldview with strikingly dark implications for the country. Trump is running the most nativist, xenophobic campaign in modern times. And yes, that's probably the case, not including all the media effects, etc. But that's kind of where it's headed. Anti-immigrant zealotry, and then obviously overlapping world events, etc. Even Fox has cut away from coverage. Fox cut away from Trump as he spreads all the usual, and it's unfortunate that we can say that they're usual, but lies about hurricane disaster relief, that migrants are getting all the benefits, or that you're not going to get money, or blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's just lies. It's just very, how much truth there is almost zero, approaching zero anyway. And then he does a speech in Detroit where, he talks about his hair, praises dictators, thanked a Project 2025 author, described by Fox when they cut away as a wide-ranging speech. Well, similarly, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein of Watergate actually found somewhere in their archives, I figure it's in somebody's garage, a 1989 micro cassette with an interview with Donald Trump. Not that I'm going to play any of it, but you can see in the Washington Post, it's accessible, that they interviewed Trump, and there was a tape of it from 1989. So interesting, and not necessarily profound, but as Mehdi Hassan said, yesterday, the most amoral man to reach the presidency, a thin-skinned narcissist, cheated on his first wife with his second wife, been found liable for sexual abuse and lies in every breath. And needless to say, that was not very popular, having made that speech for the BBC in Philadelphia. But it is, as a new article in the Atlantic magazine has pointed out, that this reality fracturing is the result of an information ecosystem that is dominated by platforms that offer financial and attentional incentives to lie and enrage, and to turn every tragedy and large event into a shameless content creation opportunity. So that's kind of what happened when Trump was talking about the beginning of the last two hurricane events, and the sort of the space in between, where it did allow for piggybacking, in effect, on the with all due respect, the sensationalism of what seemed to be a Category 5 storm, but by the time it got to the coast, it was a Category 3. So that's a whole nother thing. It is a informational crisis, and does require us to cool down, as Joe is doing with his lentils. And so I think it's important to argue, as does the Atlantic article, that we're moving on from treating misinformation as if it's inherently persuasive, and to recognize what it really is, the kind of misinformation that's being produced and ultimately becomes malinformation because it has a kind of hate speech thing attached to it, and to recognize what it really is, as I tried to insert in one little written piece, a reinforcement mechanism that creates and supports false realities. This is not false news or fake news. This is a false reality. Fake news is kind of a cipher from just any assertion could be called fake news, but a actual reality becoming false, I think, a little bit deeper. And so I think one needs to, especially in this election, we need to rethink this sort of thing. We shouldn't react to the first thing that comes out of anybody's mouth, but more specifically, the GOP has taken it as a matter of style, that saying false things is really kind of important, de rigueur, and no one's calling them to account on it. Unfortunately, certain elements of the news media aren't even doing that, so it's an interesting problem. There's a really good article by Phil Bump. Well, it's not a good article. It's an okay article, but it gives you a compendium of various ways in which you can look at election prediction. That is, various pollsters, as I mentioned, the betting sites, etc. So there's different ways in which you can think about predicting elections or whatever, including Alan Lichtman, I guess, the prognosticator, who technically, they claim that, in 20 years or blah, blah, blah years, 30 years, has proven to be wrong only in the Bush-Gore 2000 election. Well, technically, as I've mentioned before, that if you actually ignored the Supreme Court ruling and actually gone in, as a group did, Gore won Florida. And so therefore, Lichtman is actually been correct every damn time. Now, the problem, of course, is that he's been critiqued by saying, well, your 13 little, structural criteria for predicting the outcome of an election, they attack it on being, we could say that it's too qualitative, well, or that it's not quantitative, and that's a whole nother set of questions. Interesting. And his current prediction is that Harris will win, and your mileage may vary, but the fact is, with all due respect, he's never been wrong. And not that I'm going to necessarily support his position if he is wrong, but it is pretty interesting once you act down to the details. So there are guides to reading political polls that come in this Phil Bump article in the Washington Post, and I think it's just yesterday, I think, and it's worth reading. Um, and sort of explains the question of how Nate Silver was wrong in 2016. Well, he was wrong in the sense that he suggested that Hillary Clinton was likely to win, but in terms of the site 538, the site gave Trump a 3 in 10 chance of winning. So that's not even odds, obviously, but it's hardly, as Bump says, hardly a prediction that such an outcome was impossible, which is kind of the way people are thinking about this. So, he had in effect, 538 said Trump had a 30% chance of winning, and unfortunately, that certainly possible. 3 out of 10 flips of the coin or whatever. And the problem with Phil Bump's article is, like, unfortunately, Phil Bump tends to, well, not prevaricate, but he says, well, by the end of his article, he says, well, you might as well flip a coin. And I don't think it's really quite that random, but it's interesting anyway. Okay, so as I say, I've mentioned before that the bookmakers are Trump has become the bookmakers' favorite to win the presidential election, which doesn't really tell us anything. It just tells us that more money is being bet on Trump, and you don't short sell those kinds of bets, but it's interesting to see that some people are throwing money at it, and with all due respect, the money being thrown is relatively cheap money, and I think coming from let's say the Eastern Hemisphere, let's put it that way. John Ralston wrote a little thing on questions during the Univision town hall that Harris did, and it was interesting. You could critique Harris for saying she couldn't name 3 virtues that Donald Trump has. I can't think of 3, and I think holding Harris to it is, as she says, I think her answer was, well, Trump loves his family, but understandably doesn't seem like that much. The family has much good to say about him. So that was a kind of indeterminate sort of answer. So a deflecting answer. Of course, Trump has an infinite number of virtues, as he is probably want to tell you. I would be hard pressed to figure out what virtues he has. I think a certain amount of consistency. I think that was important. Other than that, it's permanent falsehood or delusion or narcissism. Narcissism, I think, would guarantee that he's always truthful in that particular context. However deluded, which aren't the same thing. Okay, so that's kind of my little set of yammerings there, and we're getting kind of 3/4 of the way through as we're getting towards the of Joe squeezing up those little thingamabobs there. We can refer to it in English as a kind of dumpling, I suppose.
Yeah, they call them lentil meatballs.
Okay.
Another, I've heard it described as lentil falafel.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically cooked red lentils with bulgur wheat and parsley, scallion, sauteed onion, and the orangish red color comes from the dried chili paste and tomato paste. So then you roll it into a elongated shape like this, and then to get the signature shape, you just, I guess, I got a fat finger here, so I'm not sure how it's gonna come across. Something like that. How's that look? You want to get these ridges.
I could just see that at some moment, not very soon, of course, Tesla has now released a human robot that they claim can do anything, quote unquote, whatever that means. And so I assume that you could probably get a robot to grip these, right?
Kind of like a
That's
reverse brass knuckle, bulghur
indeed.
knuckle.
Indeed. I didn't say much about Ukraine today. I can just say that we're still at the same point. The point I made last night about Ukraine was that some folks did an analysis of all the air alerts over 3 years, and alerts are now, there's just a lot more and they're a lot longer. So the air campaign is progressively getting more serious for over Ukraine. Um, that's one piece of very empirical data. Um, Other than that, the same things are happening. More equipment is being transferred. Um, Last week, they knocked down a very large a drone, and that it was an experimental drone, which the Russians promptly shot down. Well, I think they shot down their own drone, and then they sent a missile to drop on it so that it would be obliterated in terms of leaving behind any secrets that the Ukrainians might latch hold of. So there's that. Um, the war continues. There's been advances and retreats along the entire line, a little bit of shifting towards the south. More air alerts on Kyiv. A few new sites have been sort of attacked with other drones. Generally, the smaller drones are being hit. The larger missiles still are getting, a lot of them are getting through. But there's, it's just, it continues. I can't remember whether it's Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan, one of the stands Putin is going to, and the country is a signatory to the International Criminal Court, and like not unlike Mongolia, they're not going to arrest Putin. So it's another stupid week in justice. So in that particular case, some people are pimping the idea that for some reason I can't quite figure it out. They were testing one of the new Taurus, the German Taurus missile, which is a cruise missile in, for some reason, South Korea, showing that it has a 400-kilometer range, and that's a kind of really important thing. There's been talk and a controversy about whether Germany will transfer the Taurus missile, which is an air-launched missile from, standard fighter planes. F-16, I suppose, can launch one of those missiles. And so they're not being provided to Ukraine yet. But, it is a question of at some point, the West should probably just let them launch whatever they want and give them whatever they want, because that's kind of where it's going. On the other hand, it is it's a military-industrial complex deal, and it's not like the Cold War is coming back, but it's certainly cold. It's getting chillier. Let's put it that way. What with a variety of smaller events along the borders in the Baltics, a lot of missiles, well, not a lot, but several missiles in every missile attack seem to have gotten loose because of Ukrainian electronic warfare jamming, which forces a variety of missiles and drones to fly off course and land in places like Belarus. So there's been that as well. The diplomatic activity still goes on. There is a summit coming up. It's unclear. I think Russia was invited to the summit and is not going to show up. But it's just a means by which that has to be sort of arbitrated. Also, President Biden did not go to a Ramstein munitions summit, as it were. There's a meeting with France, Germany, and I'm not sure what else, Poland maybe.
Did he go to the Rammstein concert instead?
No, he didn't. Oh, the Rammstein concert, yes, indeed. But no, I mean he decided that he wouldn't go because of staying in to deal with the several hurricanes that have, you know, or at least to avoid the criticism that he was spending more time in Europe than in the United States, and you know, looking at the that kind of problem, which had all of its own issues. You know, on the one hand, governors said that they were all, you know, compliant and happy to receive federal aid, and yet the GOP Trump election machine has been producing all kinds of fabrications and misinformation and disinformation about the activity. Needless to say, it is problematic because, you know, they only had just been clearing up the damage from um, um, uh, the prior hurricane. So the you know, it's a pretty messy result. Not quite as bad as people expected. I think once it hit land, it did lose a lot of force. That doesn't mean to say that things didn't get messed up, and in fact they did. But it's not as bad as it could have been. Let's just put it that way. Let's see. On the European front, not much else is happening. I mean, there's all the usual the usual issues, but nothing cataclysmic so far, unless you count the fact that there are, you know, power outages and all kinds of other things that are going to be kind of standard activity throughout the winter. And there is some suggestion that there will be power failure problems. But the fact is also, I think that the Russians have backed off of attacking the grid, the Ukrainian grid, because the Ukrainians have proven to be somewhat effective about attacking the Russian grid. And so I think there's a little bit of a reticence to attack it further. That is a beautiful dish, Joe.
There we are. The oh, hold on a minute. Wait, where was
Get all our pictures
it?
together.
Not the cheek kofta, that's the raw meat one, but the mercimek köftesi. That's what it's called. So then you just take one of these, put it in a little lettuce wrap, squeeze a lemon, and they're served typically around 5 o'clock tea time or on special occasions. Be cool. Very tasty.
Nice. Things are
We got it
coming
in
up.
under an hour.
Yes, actually.
No.
10 minutes or so to spare.
Glories of the pressure cooker, I tell you.
We do have Twilight Zone happening tonight, I think, and
Yeah.
perhaps John can give us a little preview. John?
Yes, I'm here. So
What's
tonight,
happening?
tonight on the Twilight Zone, no horses in this one, Harsh. Uh, Tonight it's a little bit different. We have presented on the Twilight Zone a award-winning French film short from 1961. Um, called Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. So it's a French, yeah, Oscar winner, uh,
Wait,
Cannes
so it
Film
is Twilight
Festival
Zone?
winner. What's that?
It is the Twilight Zone, or
It is the Twilight Zone, yes. Rod Serling bought the right to broadcast the film, and he thought it was appropriate for the Twilight Zone. And yeah, I won a number of awards, Oscar, Cannes Film Festival, and a French Caesar or César. I don't know how they say it.
Sorry, yeah. Yeah. It is as they say in, film theory, it is actually quite cinematic in that sense.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And it is classic, and people should, really recall that this is important, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and yeah, so I'm looking forward to it. I haven't seen it in a while. Well, that's not true. We watched it on the Red Hour. Um, it was based on an Ambrose Bierce short story. It was also incorporated later into a longer film, which was composed of three Ambrose Bierce stories, also a French film. Um, so yeah, that's at 8:30.
Excellent. I'm not sure what we have planned after that.
Later on in the evening, Henchman was going to show a viewing of The Penguin.
Ah, okay. More things after that then. Let me say that we're going to, try to include some new changes, perhaps someone else besides me trying to do the previews, and so we can actually pre-record the the up and coming events. We're going to be making some changes and subsequent changes in the schedule that at least I know of. Weekly Marks is going back to Sundays, and usually we do it on Sunday. We used to do it on the Sundays during the cold season, and then this is an ideal time since the Class Unity folks are going to be. We've finished with that particular thing on the 2008 financial crisis. A new thing that we're doing on Saturdays from 3 to 6 for several weeks is it is the 75th anniversary of the revolution of the People's Republic of China, and there is a history series done by the I think it's the People's Forum, and it's a 3-hour seminar class presentation from 3 to 6 on Saturdays, and so we'll be broadcasting that or showing that as well. On Saturdays for coming weeks, and people should get into that because it will be quite good. And it is a history, considering also that it is the 75th anniversary. Really important. On the 70th anniversary, there were certainly a lot of things that happened, and I can tell you that the 70th was pretty exciting. With all due respect, if you like parades, there's lots of parades, and 75th, of course. Is important for that same kind of reason. And those who don't know the history very well should fill in. There's plenty of history to remember, learn, some of which is still being uncovered. Some interesting, problematic, some, even at a ground level, you can see that there still is a residual tension between, for example, the Japanese and the Chinese on the basis of the 1925 to 37 war or invasion by Japan. So there's a lot of important history to cover in that particular context. Even the history from the beginning of the early Republican history up through the history, up through the World War II, et cetera, et cetera. It's all really vastly interesting history. Up through the Civil War that precedes the the founding of the PRC. So all of those are interesting stories. I don't know. Are we doing Good Omens tonight? Is that what's coming up?
No, that was Penguins, and then, or I believe,
Penguins. Okay.
unless the Penguin, and on Saturday and Sunday afternoon at noon o'clock, Henchman's also doing a number of different showings, some animated series, and I believe some Lord of the Rings, the Rings
yes.
of Power.
Yes, I recall.
And so then Weekly Marks will be back on Sunday at 3, and later on will be the election film night. Bobby is showing.
Oh, yes,
That
that's right.
is correct.
That's on Sunday.
Either Bobby or Primary Colors. I think it's
Okay.
going to be Bobby though, because Bobby's good.
All right. Thank you, Lane. Excellent. As I said, if you want to know more about the schedule, we do have it on our Discord, even though in Turkey, Discord is verboten. You should come join us at theautonomouscollective.net, and that's still working.
Yes.
Most of you aren't in Turkey, so there shouldn't be any problem getting to our Discord. But we have those kinds of things. We're getting close to the end now. We've hit 8 o'clock, and we will try to do better next week.
Indeed.
Thank you
Thanks
very
all.
much. See you soon.
Wow.